Good evening, and thank you for joining me with the Mindful Money Moment show here on Mari More Life. I'm so grateful to have you all join me this evening. It is such a pleasure. And this evening, we have some really amazing ladies who are going to be sharing with us. They're going to be giving some encouragement about credit and collections. So we'll be talking about, how to manage our credit, how to recover from maybe a financial trauma where we've, misused our credit and fallen into, low credit scores or some challenge that has happened. Any questions that you have, please feel free to enter them in the comments, either on Facebook or on YouTube. And if we're not able to address them during the show, then we will absolutely address them afterwards. I will have our experts here be able to reach out and make sure that you receive a response for your concern. So I am Kivette Minor Kane, your financial liberation expert. And I guide women on their journey to self-sufficiency by teaching them how to manage their money without losing their minds. And that is the key. It is about understanding how our emotions affect our money management so that we're able to make better decisions, to create better habits, and to experience the true quality of life that we desire and that you deserve. And then also being able to fulfill our purpose in life. What is life if we're not able to be fulfilled and satisfied, to feel like we're contributing to something, for ourselves, but then also beyond ourselves. We're looking at the big picture and we're also bringing it back in to look at the micro pictures, because we want to be able to see those niches or those segments in our lives that come together to make the whole picture. But we've got to give some focused attention to those areas that sometimes get overlooked. And for women, that main area that gets overlooked oftentimes is our self-care, is our mindset. How are you paying attention to your mentality, what you're thinking, and then how your thoughts affect your feelings? So your emotional mindset, your spirituality, connecting with a creator that's greater than yourself, being able to actually take care of yourself physically. So are you taking time to have a spa night at least once a week? And I have some tips for that I will share with you, or you can check out my other videos on this site and on this page to be able to connect and to see how you go through that process of having a regular routine of self-care, whether it be in the morning or at night, but just taking at least 5 to 15 minutes for yourself to breathe in peace and exhale anxiety, so that we are able to function and to move forward progressively. We want to be positive. We want to be productive, and we want to continue to make the progress that's necessary for us to accomplish our goals each and every day. And so I'm here to support you in that process, especially on Monday nights with our Mindful Money Moment and with our special guests, as they're going to come in and share some of the keys that have supported them in being able to provide guidance to women just like yourself. And then also for being able to provide some insight based on their own experiences and being able to, relate to what's going on in life, and, how we're able to really make progress in that area of our mindset. And then we're going to talk to a couple of money management experts. We have that they're going to help us to understand how we can manage our credit when we need to recover. But even before we get to recovery, our younger ones who maybe are just getting started with credit, what advice can we give them, to get a solid foundation set up for themselves where their credit is concerned? Because that is the absolute foundation for your financial house. You want to build a strong foundation before you start putting up the walls and the windows and the doors, and then finally your roof. Because if you don't build on a solid foundation, then your whole house can crumble. and we understand that. So making sure that we're able to really put things in perspective and to take the steps that are necessary. This is not just about what to do, but this is also about how to do it. So take a moment to like the page, like us on YouTube, share this information, share this video with your friends and family who you think would be able to benefit, and make some comments in the bottom below the video so that we'll be able to know what you thought about it. If it was something that was beneficial for you, that especially stood out, or there's more information that you're looking for in this topic, then please feel free to ask your question. There are no stupid questions. There are never any stupid questions. We want you to make sure that you ask every question that you have, but we're also here as the experts to answer the questions that you don't know yet to ask. So on your journey to self-sufficiency, we are here to educate, to guide, and to support you all the way through this process so that you're able to stand on your own 2 feet and to move forward successfully. So on that note, I'm going to introduce to you 2 of our mindset ladies here who are coming to us as therapists and psychologists to give us a little more in-depth information. Now we have Sherrae Lachhu, who is a therapist, coach, and entrepreneur. She is a relationship therapist, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist who is committed to empowering individuals to be the best version of themselves in life, love, and business through counseling, coaching, and consulting. While her practice is equally composed of individuals and couples, the work she does with them is always centered on identity, authenticity, and empowerment. And that's what we're about here at Mari Moore Life, is making sure that we are empowering you to take back your financial power, to take back your mindset, to make sure that you are checking in on yourself, to be on direction with your pathway that you're taking on this journey to self-sufficiency. We're like your GPS. When you get turned around, you can come back and watch these videos and reroute. And so you'll be able to reach your ultimate destination because you deserve that. And we want to make sure that you are reaching your goals to fulfill your purpose in life and to be fully satisfied. And so that's what Sherrae Lachhu is going to help us to understand. Now, our second guest for our mindset section is Dr. Blaire. And Dr. Blaire is a clinical psychologist. And so she's here to help us to understand more about behavioral health. So she's worked in behavioral health for about 8 years in various settings, such as the university, counseling centers. She's done some counseling, some psychiatric hospitals, and some medical hospital systems that she's worked with as well. She is most passionate about serving underrepresented communities. And in her bio online, you'll find that she highlights her work and her emphasis on working with the Black community, being able to work with mental health and to bring to the forefront to remove the stigma and to bring to the forefront the knowledge that we need to be confident about attaining and maintaining our mental health. And so she's utilizing solutions to heal the cycles of trauma. She has provided clinical services to and operated with an administrative leadership role. And she holds a bachelor's of science in psychology. And so you'll often find her promoting psychology, inspiring others, and seeking social justice. And that's exactly what she's going to do here with us this evening. So I want to welcome in these 2 ladies. And thank you very much. Here we go. Dr. Blaire, thank you so much for being here. And Sherrae Lachhu, thank you so much. So please, ladies, tell us a little bit about yourselves and help us to understand, what first, Dr. Blaire, we'll start with you. What first is your primary focus when you deal with a client who has dealt with some financial trauma or just some trauma in general?
One, I want to look at the root of it. Where did it start? What was the the leading factors that led up to the event and what makes it feel traumatic for that particular person. I think oftentimes when we look at trauma, many people want to define what trauma is for each person, and that's not necessarily recommended. Trauma can
Mhm.
be received and experienced in various different ways for each individual. And so I believe it's highly important to look at why is it traumatic for that individual, because it definitely can impact the trajectory of what treatment may look like for them in terms of how we are working on that in individual sessions or whether it's in group as well. And so I want to look at how is that traumatic for them? How has it impacted them currently? How is it related to their past? Because oftentimes things that are experienced in our current is rooted in some childhood experiences, and they're oftentimes what we call traumas may pair with one another.
Mhm.
And so we want to go beneath the surfaces in order to really get to the root of the problem. And then that helps us to move forward or yield forward into how are we going to work on solutions that are not only helpful in this moment in time, but that are also going to be long term. I think it's great to go to therapy. I'm a huge advocate for therapy, for therapists to also go to therapy as well. But outside of therapy, the huge point is, what did you take away? What did you take away? And what are you able to use in the future, again, based off of that experience that you had in therapy at that point in time? And sometimes people may return to therapy, which is awesome. Though the point is thinking about it as if you are building a building. You are
Mhm.
stone at stone, you're putting brick by brick. It is a stepping stone process, and it is not flat, it is not surface. We continue to build. And so, my hope and my desire is that when people do participate actively in therapy, is that they are able to build upon the foundation that they started once before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And so, Sherrae, we would like to talk to you a little bit more about the family side of that. We, have heard from Dr. Blaire about individuals and how individuals can be affected. And that point about recognizing that trauma is not trauma, it is based on the perspective of the individual. And so we can't just say that a blanket situation is going to affect everyone who's been exposed in the same way, but we have to be sensitive to the individual. Okay. And so
Absolutely.
how does that affect, or how does that have an effect then when you're looking at a family situation or a relationship situation when you've got a couple who now one partner has, some traumas that they've experienced, and then the other partner may have some different traumas, or they may be, trying to balance that out. How would you address that, Sherrae?
So I think when I'm looking at couples, and I love everything that Dr. Blaire said, and in my individual work, I agree totally with that. I think what stands out the most for me is I always say to my clients, all behavior and context makes sense, right? And so
Mhm.
we have to apply the proper context to things. And I think sometimes people look at money as a domain in and of itself, and they look at it
Mhm.
as separate, and really it's integrated into a lot of our thoughts and our beliefs about who we are, what we can achieve, what we have achieved. And a lot of those are passed down intergenerationally, right? So when I'm working with couples, or in the past when I've done a lot of family work, that work was really looking at, again, to Dr. Blaire's point, what was the origin of this? Because there's always an origin. You'll hear someone say, well, I've been struggling, I work 2 jobs, I'm, making money, and then I just feel like it's not enough money that I'm making. And when I start to kind of go back and tease back, and this is in therapy or coaching, I go back and
Mhm.
say, what was the first thought that you had about what money meant to you? What was the number that you wanted to hit
Mhm.
where you felt like I made it? And then what
Mhm.
were the habits that led you to not be able to hold on to that money that you had even when you made 20 or 30 or 40,000 less? Right? And so
Yeah.
whenever we start to look at it, it's usually something that happened within the family, right? When I have a
Yeah.
couple that comes in, and I'm sure this isn't a surprise to you guys, that a large portion of divorce is often about money or finances, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people it's about money, but not really about money, because money represents something, right? So it's
Mhm.
typically values. What do I value? And then there becomes that power struggle. And so when I'm dealing with a couple and they have fundamental differences in beliefs about money and how to handle money, it is always rooted in how money was used as they were a child. So if
Mhm.
I didn't have and I was in lack, and I'll use myself because a lot of our practice and a lot of the brand that I have is built around me and my own personal experience. When I met
Mhm.
my husband, who comes from a third world country, he comes from Guyana, right? His experiencing of poverty was different than mine. So I thought
Mhm.
being broke was being out of college making only $7 an hour. That was broke to me. His
Right.
broke was maybe they didn't have it all, right? So it was a different level. So when we got together, he could take spending that he felt was frivolous if it was for something that he valued. If it was not something he placed a high value on, then it was a point of contention for us. So what we
Mhm.
had to realize is we valued two different things. And so when money came in, we had to decide, how do we best handle that in a way where I don't disrespect what you value and you also don't disrespect what I value, and that at least our basic needs are met and we have something set aside. And so that's
Mhm.
a process. If you can get the folks to realize where they're really on the same page, you just have different values. You don't have to have my same value, but I have to support you in yours and you have to support me in mine. And once you get that going, then it's like, okay, well, then we can set a number. And this, I don't need to know about that part because the number is right. As long as the number is right, I can move forward. So it's really about coming to a compromise based on what do I understand is the origin for where this began, what do I value? What does my partner value? And then how can we meet in the middle? Almost if you think of a Venn diagram, what is the overlap that really I can move forward with in a respectful way for me as well as for my partner?
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And, one of the keys that you talked about there is being able to look at each other and recognize the differences from your initial money introduction. And I, call that our money memory because that's, our first introduction to money, our first exposure to other people's interactions and relationship with money. And that shapes us, even into our present. So, are there any exercises that you would recommend for a couple who is having trouble coming together and they feel like money is the thing that is dividing them, where they can start before they come to see you? Of course, we would recommend they, get online and schedule an appointment so that they can come and receive the guidance that is necessary. But before they even take that step, or in the process of waiting for that date to come up, what would you recommend that they can maybe do in being able to communicate with each other about how to overcome that challenge?
A very simple exercise. I have them split into three pillars. Anybody can
Mhm.
do this that's watching at home. And if you look at the pillars, you're looking at what are the things that are absolutely ideal. Like this is how much money we would make, and this is how it would be spent, right?
Mhm.
What are the things that I'm willing to negotiate on? I know my partner values having nice clothing and handbags. I don't value that, but that's what they value. So I can
Mhm.
negotiate on that. And what are the absolute deal breakers? So lying about money, withholding extra accounts, right? Um,
Mhm.
anytime there is excessive giving away of money or not paying bills on time, right? So all the things that they typically fight about, thinking about those things, making a list, but putting them in those categories. Because if you can start with the category of where you idealistically want to be, you may not be able to end up there, but usually
Mhm.
there's very little distance between where you idealistically want to be and where you can compromise. The deal
Okay.
breakers usually are huge values that are intrinsic to that person. And so, usually, once you can figure out those deal breakers, those are the dysfunctions that if they can't figure that part out, then yeah, I would suggest they seek therapy or coaching around money management and things like that. But if they can figure out those top two, they'll be okay because the money is never really about the money. It's about what you said about what were the imprints that that money represented. And so
Yeah.
if they can look at those things, they can make the changes that they need to make to have a healthier and happier relationship.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure they're going to rewind the video and go make some notes so that they'll be able to put that into practice. Absolutely. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, Dr. Blaire, is there a technique that you would recommend for individuals who are attempting to identify what their trauma is? Somebody knows, something's off, something is not right. I just don't feel myself. I don't feel like everything is okay. How can they take a moment to identify what the trauma is and what extent of support they might need from that point?
Yeah, first, I'd like to distinguish the difference between having a distressing experience versus having a traumatic experience. When it's traumatic, it is oftentimes when you feel like your life or a moment in your life was in danger. And
Hmm.
I want to separate the two because we all experience stress, we all experience distressing moments, and it's very common. And it is also common for us to have traumatic events. However, they are not always the same. And so when we
Yeah.
look at a traumatic event, being able to distinguish, it was this moment in time when I felt endangered. And this is specifically what made me feel endangered, is what we really want to zone into. And when it comes to how that impacts your life, of course, we have a list of symptoms that we can go off of. And
Yeah.
oftentimes they overlap with a lot of things that we see when it comes to our mental and emotional states. For example,
Hmm.
changes in anxiety. You are feeling a increase in feeling a bit more worried, or you have a tendency to your brain, it continues to go. You can't seem to slow your thoughts down, or you feel that you're a bit more hyper vigilant, or you're a bit more watchful of your surroundings. This is also looking at whatever that event was. It is impacting my behavior. It is impacting my emotional state. It is impacting my thought processes. It is impacting how I interact with other people, my social life, my functioning within my work life as well. We want to look at how that impacts multiple sectors of your life, especially as it also comes down to how you're making decisions. And I think that oftentimes
Hmm.
we don't connect it to how it impacts your financial state or your financial management, because you're instead looking at the first layer, but it ends up trickling down to how you're making decisions financially, how you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis. And that is where we can almost come up with a web, so to speak. If
Hmm.
here's one layer, here's another layer, and the layers continue to add on and on and on.
Yeah.
If we do not take the opportunity to slow things down and take a closer look at the root. And that is why I always picture a tree. Imagine
Yeah.
a tree. We can cut off a branch, we can take off some leaves, but the tree is still there because the roots run deep. And if we can get to the roots,
Absolutely.
we end up taking care of so much that that fruit or lack of fruit that tree is bearing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Being able to identify that list of emotions and triggers and feelings is absolutely essential. I know that they're able to find some information online through Google, but if you need a specific list, you can reach out to Dr. Blaire and you'll be able to contact her on Instagram based on her handle that we have here. So thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Blaire. And now we're going to switch over to our next segment, which is going to be dealing with our money managers. And they're going to be coming in and helping us to understand how are we able to recover from the trauma that these situations can cause for us. So once we identify the trauma, we recognize our emotions. How is that affecting our money management? Oftentimes when we experience traumas or we get depressed, then we move into oh, I need to feel better mode, and we want to go and do some retail therapy. And you know what I say, you guys, we got to pause before we purchase. We cannot run out and just swipe that card or, hand out that cash and give it away, because then we lose our financial power. That's how we give it away. We want to make sure that we're taking back our financial power, that we're creating a plan before we spend, and that we're being conscious that we're not being emotionally driven in our spending, because then that will lead us to not be able to accomplish our goals and to fulfill our dreams in the end, and to ultimately achieve the success that we desire. And so I'm going to bring in to discuss with us those topics Dee Bowden, who had founded BCS Solutions. It's a revenue recovery company. And she did that because she wanted to solve cash flow problems for small business owners. And I know some of you ladies out there are entrepreneurs. You're growing your business, especially with the pivots that we've had to make during COVID. COVID. A lot of you have started new businesses, and being able to understand that, the sale is not complete until you collect the cash. And Dee's going to talk about that. She's got an amazing new book that's out with that title called Collect the Cash, and it was released just earlier this week and is now available online. And so I'm going to have that posted up for you on this under this video, so you'll be able to find that book and take advantage of the knowledge that she shared within that. She has over 10 years of financial recovery experience in which she's collected over $10 million. Would you like to have that $10 million? Now, you might not have somebody that owes you that much money, but if somebody owes you $1,000, that can make a big difference in your month of business. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding how we need to handle that. And she's also served several companies as well as working for government agencies. So we know that she is very experienced in that, and we look forward to hearing what she's got to say more about it. We also have Toi Saunders with us, and Toi is a life coach and a financial educator. She's lived abroad around the world. She's lived in Italy. She was born and raised in San Diego, California, where she's reaching us from tonight. She is a public speaker, a retired corporate manager, a life coach, and she teaches bounce back strategies. She was able to survive through the previous crash that we experienced in 2009 through 2012. And now being able to deal with the financial challenges that we are facing during this time of COVID, it's kind of like deja vu. And so those strategies will be beneficial for us to be able to apply, for you all to be able to apply even during this time. And so she's going to share some of that with us as well. So I'm going to welcome in both Dee and Miss Toi. Hello, ladies. How are you this evening?
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. It's great to be here.
Oh, I switched that up for you, Mommy. There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. Look at us.
So how are you, ladies?
We look amazing.
Thank you so much for coming to share with us this evening, this valuable information. We're going to start with you, Dee, as we talk about the big money.
Oh,
corporate.
You're going to put me on blast first? Okay.
We're going to put you on blast first. I want you to tell us a little bit about what you do and how you're able to do it and how you can support our small business owners who are watching this program.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, Kavette, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the show. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching this fabulous conversation around the world. I am Dee Bowden. I'm the founder of B-Says Solutions. Fun facts about me. I love jazz, Ferris wheels, and wine, as Kavette knows. So what do? I work. So let's do the fun part for. Listen, you might need some wine after having this conversation about money.
I know, right? Well, we're gonna do some Wealth and Wine Wednesday, so y'all stay tuned.
Yes, we definitely. So listen, how did I get into this conversation about money, around recovering money? It's because I used to work for a small IT company outside of Boston, where I'm from. They had $8 million worth of sales on the books, not in the bank. I got hired to collect the money. Unfortunately, even though I collected $6 million in 60 days while working part-time, the CEO of the company says, listen, let's have a chat. I'm thinking we're about to get a bonus. He comes downstairs and says, listen, we've made an executive decision across sales, contracts, order entry, invoicing, collections, my lane. We're shutting down the company. You got 30 minutes to go pack up your box and leave the building 2 months before Christmas. Now, that happened to me almost 15 years ago. But you know how there are life-changing incidents that happen in your life that change your life, hopefully for the better? Yeah. Well, this one did that for me. Because I looked up after all of that money I collected and all those things that happened, and I was like, how does this happen? And so when Kavette was reading my bio, when I talked about why I created my business is to teach small business owners to make sure the sale is complete and the money's in the bank. And that means that when you have contracts, that your contract is set up correctly. Number two, that whatever your deliverable means whatever the product or service that you're going to offer to your company, to your customer happens, that you invoice them and that you get paid. And if you're running into a problem of getting paid, you don't perform any more services until you actually figure out what's the disconnect, what's the problem. Get on the phone, review your contract, make sure you've provided the services. And so that's where Collect the Cash comes from. It's because the sale is not complete until the money's in the bank. I know that most people would rather get a root canal than have to go ask the customer to pay them for money. But you have to be willing to have the conversation. And if you can't or don't want to do that, you need somebody on your team who's able to go and negotiate on your behalf and find out. I put it this way: what had happened was, because we're answering the question of what had happened was, and regardless, whether it's corporate, government, automotive, it doesn't matter. When you provide a product or a service and you don't get paid on time based on the terms of your contract, you're answering the question, what had happened was, and you have to do problem solving, customer service, and my secret sauce is gratitude.
Absolutely. And it's a difference between what had happened and then what are you going to make happen from this point going forward, which can have the effect on your business and, whether or not you're able to continue growing your business the way that you intend to, because if you perform services and you haven't collected the cash, then that means you worked for free. I ain't working for free.
Not in these streets, we're not.
Right. Okay. Well, because the main thing we think about is the thing that you can never get back is your time. You've already invested the time and that's gone. But now you got to make sure that you are being paid the value of that time that you spent on working whatever project that was, whether you're working with individual clients or you're working with corporate clients or you're a corporate business and you've got, these individuals who are paying for your services on, a by use basis. And so what do you find is the typical situation that happens with business owners? How could you advise them about how to prevent having to go back and collect the cash?
Great question, Gabette. First thing you need, as a business owner, if you're listening to me, one of the things you absolutely need to do is track your accounts. You need to know what's the name of your customer, what's the name of the customer. If you deal in contracts or if there's a contract number, what's the contract number? How much is the contract for? Because you can't plan your finances for the month unless you know how much is the contract for and how many sales do you have. If you have one customer, you gotta walk that all the way through. And then when are you supposed to deliver the product or the service to them? When are you supposed to invoice them? And when are you supposed to get paid? That's the best part of all of it. But you gotta know what's going on. And then what had happened is that when you have your contract, when you provide the service, when you invoice your customer, you should be tracking that. You should know, just like on the sales side, they know how many sales they have, how many customers they have, how many sales they're expecting to gain in the month. Well, on the same side, on the business side for collections, B2B collections, business to business collections, how many invoices did you submit for the month? When are the payments supposed to be in? You need to be tracking that. And you also have I call old school a tickler, when you're supposed to get paid. And the day, if that 24-hour that date passes, somebody needs to be on the phone doing the follow-up. The fortune is in the follow-up. And that's the part that most people don't want to do. They're like, they're my friend. Oh, they'll pay me. Listen, this is business. This is not nonprofit. This isn't charity. You're in business. So your responsibility is to provide the product or service. It's to do the follow-up. It's to solve the problem. It's to provide excellent customer service and to do gratitude. And part of gratitude is saying, thanks for paying me, but also making sure you actually did the right thing and followed up. Absolutely. And if there's a problem, you have to be willing to thank them for telling you what it is, number one. Number two, giving you the opportunity to do what I call course correct and fix it, address it, apologize if you need to. But your goal is to keep that relationship going forward. And how you do that is provide excellent customer service and do the follow-up. That's how you track what's going on. So because the word says it this way. You need to know the state of your flocks. Your flocks is your accounts. And how you track what's going on, that's how you know there's a problem. Unfortunately, sometimes in our business relationships, we don't get those warning lights, like in your car when there's a light comes on in your car, something's wrong. I'm gonna take it into the dealership, get it checked. Well, the warning light is when you're having this exchange with your customer and something goes left or right. Right then, I or somebody needs to address this issue, because we don't want this to go from this little problem to a huge problem. You have to be on the offensive, and you have to be willing to ask the questions. And like I said, ask them and then pause and take notes. I'm old school. Notepad, write it down. And if you made a mistake,
Absolutely.
own it up. See, this is old school stuff, but to me, it's
Well,
just common sense. If you made a mistake, take responsibility. Yes, we messed up. Absolutely. And we're going to course correct and fix this. Good customer service does that all the time. The companies that we admire so much, what do? They are constantly doing course correction. You get surveys on everything. What are they doing?
Yeah.
How can we
Yeah.
improve our customer experience? How can we fix this? Well, the same thing as a small business owner, you need to be doing the follow-ups. You need to be doing the thank yous. You need to be making sure that things are going right. And if something goes wrong, take responsibility, do a course correct, fix it so that you can maintain that relationship.
Absolutely. And so I hear you talking about basically that these business owners need to make sure that they have the correct systems in place to prevent that error, and so that they can do the necessary follow-up, because the success is in the prep, but the fortune is in the follow-up.
Absolutely.
And that's what we want to keep in mind. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dee. Now we're going to turn over to Miss Toi. How are you this evening?
I am doing so well, Kavette. Thank you for offering me and inviting me on the show. And Dee,
absolutely, thank you.
Some jewels there, your information.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're going to be talking a little bit more about on the individual side of how someone, when they're dealing with their credit, first of all, how do we prevent ourselves from getting into a major credit disaster? Because our credit is actually the foundation of our financial house. If we don't have our credit straight, then everything else is just going to crumble right around with it. You know, whether that's our cash flow, because then we're paying extra money to pay off debt and putting that money toward interest, you know, yes. Or that we don't have enough money to provide for the insurance or to save for our future because we're paying that extra interest. You know, so what are your recommendations in terms of how someone can prevent themselves from getting into a credit, you know, disaster? And then we'll look from the perspective of after the disaster happens, how do you fix it? Okay, so those two things. Can you address that, please?
Yes, I can, because my recommendation is real life experience. Okay, as a young person, I was always into understanding how money worked. And in our home, of course, a lot of homes, and I can speak for myself, we didn't talk about money. Mom and dad didn't talk about money. Things were just paid for, you know, so didn't sit down and tell us this is the way you do this. This is the way you save, you know, earn this way. No. So when dad left, it was a single parent home, and mom worked really hard, you know, and that's all I seen. But it was a good observation because I seen hard work paid the bills. Hard work was what created the income, you know, so she didn't sit there and wallow in the situation that happened before us. She's, you know, so that was a good example, first and foremost. Second of all, when I got into the workforce, I ended up landing a job in corporate, and I started right at the groundwork at the bottom. I was a collector in the seat, but I was working hard, and I worked my way up. And as I worked my way up, I went to school at the same time, still focused on thinking, how do I make sure I'm not a greeter at Walmart, or I'm not, you know, someone that is not going to have what I need. And I wanted to retire early. I wanted to retire at 45, 50, you know, I had a goal set. And I don't know how my mind was wired for this, but that's how it was working. You know, I knew when I wanted to stop working. And a lot of us, we don't go into life just wanting to completely be working our entire life. So though we individually are a business, how Dee was talking about businesses need to look out for, you know, how they structure things. We individually need to look out for how we structure our own lives as well. You know, so as that happened for me, I was looking in books. I was Susie Orman was one of the big things at that time. So I was listening to her, you know, and I wouldn't say all the advice. Some people had different contradictories about her advice as time went on, but it was the advice that I seen and I knew what to do. And the very best one was taking 10% of my income and paying myself first. You know, so I looked at myself as I deserve this. And we all as people should look at ourselves as we deserve to put aside something for us. So look at us.
Absolutely. So now how does that play into our preparing for managing our credit? As a young person, how are you prepared for managing your credit and being able, and what advice would you give?
Good question. Because we also need to know that the credit agencies are targeting also, unfortunately, our youth, you know, the ones out in college, or and you have to be aware that they are not looking out for your best interest. They're trying to gain interest. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's what they're doing. So, and when a young person gets a credit card and they get like $1,000 limit, the person that's offering the card is like, oh, congratulations, you have $1,000. No, you don't really have that $1,000 that you should use completely up. You know,
yeah, they introduce it like you won the lottery.
Yes, they sure do. So the whole point is taking a percentage of that. And a lot of people don't know, use 30% or less of what they gave you. If you had $1,000, only use up to $300. And if you can, pay that whole $300 off the next month. It will increase your credit score. If you use the entire $1,000 that they gave you in one shebang, your credit score is going to drop because it looks like you are using too much of your credit. Unless you turned around and paid that $1,000 off the next month, then that would be the flip side of it. But what teenager or what young person knows to do that, and who does have the money to necessarily pay that $1,000 off the next month?
Yeah, at that age, I mean, I'm working a job that's going to pay them that much. Now, we do have some young folks who are making, you know, quite a bit of money online and doing different things.
Yes,
but
a new generation now.
They need to, right, exactly. What they need to understand is that their credit is their credit score is a rating of their credibility. Yes. It is showing, or it is kind of that gauge. If we look at it on a scale from 1 to 10, you know, it's that gauge that gives us the, you know, oh, you're very responsible when you have a higher score at handling and managing the money that you've been entrusted with. But if you've got a lower score, it's because, like you said, they went out and spent all that money, and now they're going to be irresponsible with the money that they're given. So now their resources are going to be limited.
Right.
You know, it's just like when a parent gives the child some an allowance.
Right. And it helped me because I ended up being a chip off the old block, so to speak. I ended up getting a divorce unexpectedly and things like that, and going through some hard times. But I had my credit, you know, and so I never had to go without gas. I never had to not be able to take care of food or different things that I could use a credit card for, because I always watched my credit and paying off my bills. It was funny because instead of when I made my money or when I got income tax, I turned around and looked at my bills and said, what am I going to pay off? I didn't turn around and say, I'm about to go on a vacation. I'm about to buy. And money draws to me, money. They say money doesn't grow on trees, but money does grow with education. Money will grow back to you.
Absolutely.
And as long as I was managing,
again.
Money does not grow on trees, but money does grow. It will grow back to you with education. It roots. It definitely roots. It's a respect for money, you know? And so I turned around, paid my credit every time. I took a portion of that money and paid down my cards. So, you know, I'm sitting here now, 90% of the credit I have is not used. But that's also another thing. If you do not use the credit, they will turn around and cut your credit off. And then that will lower your score. So you have to be aware to use your credit cards every so often and pay them off. So it's all the rules and game to credit as well. And it's something that should have been taught in school. And when I knew something is not taught in school, it's something we need to learn and need to know to, you know, survive. So credit has a lot of twists and turns to it that you need to understand in order to survive in credit.
Absolutely. So, and now we're going to go back and bring in our mindset ladies, so that they will be able to kind of shed some light on the topic that we've discussed here, in bringing out more of the money management side and understanding how mindset really does play a significant role in our credit management and in our, how we handle the collections calls. How are we managing that? Even as a business owner, because we need to be able to manage that stress. A lot of money can be a very stressful topic for folks, and so we want to make sure that through mindful money moment, we're able to take an opportunity to share how they're able to balance their mindset first in order to manage their money to their ultimate success. And dealing with credit again is the fundamental foundation of our financial house. And we want to make sure that we're able to build up from there. And so my question for you all is this. When you think about, each individual that may be listening to this program, what would be the one piece of advice that you would want to leave them with in understanding how to manage their credit before an issue and how to recover from credit even after an issue, and recognizing that all of the issues we have are not our fault? They're not our fault because there are unforeseen occurrences. There are situations that are completely out of our control, and so what do we do in those situations? How do we manage that? And from your different areas and different perspectives, what should they be aware of in the management of their credit and collections from this day going forward? Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Dr. Blaire, and we'll work our way around the circle.
One consistent thing that has come out of each of our points is boundaries. We all have to practice healthy boundaries. And I think a lot of times when we talk about boundaries from a therapeutic perspective, we think about setting boundaries with other people, but we forget about this major point about setting boundaries. You have to set boundaries with yourself. It is a bi-directional process that you must practice consistently. And when you set boundaries for other people and you set boundaries for yourself, then you are able to work toward your goal and do it in a consistent manner. So I want to highlight boundaries when it comes to financial management, when it comes to emotional management, when it comes to spiritual management, is setting boundaries that are bi-directional, not just for other people, but also for yourself. And of course, depending who you are, depending on what group you are kind of looking at this perspective for, it depends on how you might go about setting those boundaries or what the boundaries are. But boundaries are a good thing, and they don't necessarily have to turn into control. And I think sometimes we get it confused, but bi-directional boundaries are not just for other people, but they are for you too.
Absolutely. To benefit us, to make sure that we're protected and we're protecting ourselves. And one of those boundaries that I recommend all the time is what you guys heard me say a little earlier: pause before we purchase. That's a boundary, not to make an impulse buy, because sometimes when we make those, I'm just saying sometimes, all the time, when we make those impulse buys, it's not something that we've thought through. And while sometimes it can be a benefit to us, oh yeah, I caught something on sale and this is great and I can use it and I did save some money. At other times it's I overspent because I didn't budget for this in advance. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We are going to make sure that from this day forward, we're putting in those boundaries in place. Yes. And if they need some support in that process, they can absolutely reach out to you, Dr. Blaire, on Instagram. And thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to move on to Dee Bowden, our Collect the Cash lady. So what are your recommendations from your perspective if you're dealing with a business owner who is, stressing over this money? What can you recommend for how they can manage the situation? And what would be the first steps that you would recommend them taking in order to resolve it?
Great question. First step, track your accounts. You can't unstress until you know how many accounts you have and how much money is owed to you. Because you can't make any more intelligent decisions until you know what's the state of your accounts. How many accounts are currently due? If you have one or two, you need to tackle those and get that money in, because part of your stress is because you don't have any cash flow coming in. So if you have two accounts that are currently due right now, if you can get those accounts paid first, your stress will go, because you're not like this about the money. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Y'all laugh, but I'm serious.
Oh, no, it's the truth.
It's the truth.
Oh, we breathe.
Because when you're looking at the low hanging fruit, go get your low hanging fruit. Go get those easy accounts that are easy to collect. Go get them first. Identify, if you're looking at all your accounts that are owed to you, identify the easy accounts. That's the low hanging fruit. If you can make a phone call, if you're able to go and visit the person and collect the money, collect the cash, go get it and make that deposit. Because once you can release that little bit of stress, then you can breathe, and then you can actually think about, okay, what's going to be my next step? Because it's like the snowball. I think it's in the Dave Ramsey talks about the snowball effect. Well, it's the same thing with your cash flow. When you get a little bit of money in or a lot of money in, you can breathe, because you can see, okay, I've got this money that I can work with. Now I can breathe. Now I can plan. And you're taking that valve of stress and releasing it, because now you can breathe, you can plan. So track your accounts, number one, go get the low hanging fruit. And then, of course, number three, purchase the book, collect the cash.
Missy, absolutely. That's an excellent plug for that book. I actually have my copy. I didn't bring it to show, but I do. I got my copy to date. There you go. My girl is always on point. And so I got my copy yesterday in the mail from Amazon, and I'm so glad to be able to, that's going to be my bedtime story tonight when I go to sleep. I'll be reading some Collect the Cash, and I'll wake up to it in the morning to get through. It's a light read. It's not, too big where it's going to be overwhelming, but it's actually something that you can read within just a few hours and be able to take the tips that Dee gives you and put them into practice, and this is, she works with small business owners, but honestly, we each individually, just like Toi mentioned before, we each need to be running our own lives as though we are a small business. It's you incorporated. So if you're not operating on a profit mode, then you're going to be in a constant deficit. And so we need to pay attention to the systems that we have in place so that we can track our money, the boundaries that we're putting in place so that we can protect ourselves, and then being able to continue to grow forward. So Toi, we're going to come back to you again. Thank you so much, Dee. And Toi, we're going to ask you the same question. What is the one tip that you would recommend for someone, if they're dealing with a credit or collection situation, whether before they get into it, where they're able to prevent or even to be able to overcome the situation that's out of their control?
Okay, I would say first and foremost, if you're getting collection calls and activity, you have rights. Always understand that you don't have to be harassed. They also have an FDCPA they have to go by. There's times you should be called. You could also write in and say you don't want to be called. You want to be contacted by letter. Also, when you get a credit card and then you start to get multiple ones because you're doing good with your credit, make sure you put those credit cards on automatic withdrawal for at least the minimum payment. So you're never late and it never affects your credit. And if you want to pay more, which you should pay more so that you're paying less on your interest, pay that when you're able to, at any time you want to, but at least that minimum payment is coming out and you are being credit healthy. Because being healthy in anything is a benefit for your life and you as a business. And I think those are the important things that I would like to share at this time.
Thank you so much, Toi, for bringing that point out. Absolutely. We have to remember that we do have rights. And even when someone is calling, it can be abusive. Because if you're already under stress and you know that, or you feel like what you have is not enough, then that only puts additional stress on you, and we want to make sure that we are alleviating as much stress as possible. that we're able to, even in challenging situations, we're able to keep ourselves composed and to look at what the future holds in terms of how we can work this out for our benefit. So absolutely knowing their rights is key. And thank you so much for sharing those tidbits and tips with our audience here today so that they'll be able to benefit. So we're going to move on now to Sherrae. Thank you so much, Sherrae, for being here. And want to have if you can unmute your mic for me, want to get your perspective on this whole, idea of being able to give that piece, that one solitary piece of advice for a couple or for a family that maybe feels they're on the brink, and how they can, manage and maintain to pull things together and move forward productively.
Absolutely. I'll go back to what I said, values. What value do I put on money and credit?
Mm-hmm.
What is my understanding of what that means and what it means about me and how I take care of things, how I show up in a responsible way, and just really assessing for myself individually, what does that mean for me? Once I do that, then I can assist my children, right? So oftentimes you have folks who pass it down to their kids. Get the money, spend the money, get the cards, spend the cards, and then everybody's in debt. And so remembering that as a parent, you always have a chance to make a different choice, and then you can help to be the blueprint for your child. As a couple, either part of the couple, whoever it is, deciding that whatever I value around money and what my value is, I'm going to express that to my partner so that we have a relationship that isn't divided by our own separate values around money, but we have almost like a crest, like a family crest. This is how we as a family have chosen to value and prioritize our money and what that money means in terms of credit, that it means responsibility, it means good standing, it means integrity. And so listen, as somebody who has poorly managed and learned to poorly manage and came in a relationship poorly managing, I can tell you, it's never too late to start again. As long as you have income coming in, then you can decide to choose differently in how you're going to spend that income, the pause before you purchase method, right? And then the tackling the smaller debts. I've easily before boosted my credit score by over 100 points just by being consistent, not having the top of my, I wasn't late with payments, but not spending up 80% of the credit available to me, just being really conscientious. So your values are so important, and making sure that those align with what you want to value in terms of your family.
So for a couple who is on the brink and they're having this challenge and money is the reason, what would you suggest they have as a conversation around the table? And for families who get together, first for the couple and then for the family, what would be the suggestion of how to have that conversation, and to be sensitive to everybody's feelings about money, in a tight situation?
Absolutely. Starting off the conversation with saying, it's important for me to share with you my value and what I learned about money, but it's also important for me to listen to you about your value. And so the goal today is just to share what we know and what we experienced, right? And how that relates to how we spend and what we prioritize in spending. And then let's come up with, again, that list. Let's come up with a list of what are the things ideally we could do, but also the things that we can compromise on. The deal breakers are the ones that can tear folks apart, but usually that's not where we get lost at. Usually we get lost at just the higher, my idealistic impression of money is this, yours is that. Okay, but there's always a compromise that isn't in the deal breaker category either. So just remember that flexibility versus rigidity is how you end up with a healthy compromise, right?
Absolutely.
So being flexible and realizing that your values are just as important as your partner's and vice versa.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sherrae, for sharing all of that. Well, I'm sure we got plenty of notes that we've taken throughout this conversation, and being able to go back and play it is a beautiful thing, because then we'll be able to know what questions to ask and be able to put ourselves in the right mindset so that we can actually be positive, productive, and make the progress that we desire. So I thank you, ladies, so much for being here with me. And I'm just going to close out the show if you'll hold on for just a moment. So I thank you all in the audience for being here this evening, for sharing in this mindful money moment. It has been truly enlightening as we've heard from each one of these ladies, their perspective on how to handle our conversations around money, where to set up our boundaries, how do we keep track of our money, and then understanding our rights so that we're able to know that we're being protected and that we can continue to do the things that we've set out, and knowing that even if you get off track for a little bit, doesn't mean that you have to be completely off the journey. We are here as your GPS, so we can help you to reroute, turn it around, get back on that road, and head towards your ultimate destination. We want to see your success. Remember that preparation leads to success, and the fortune is in the follow-up. So feel free to follow up with me at Mari Moore Life LLC. We have our website at marimorelife.com, where you'll be able to go and get more information about this topic and many others concerning our mindset as well as our money management. I also want to let you know that we have coming up every month, once a month, we have our Good Retire seminar, which focuses in on getting out of debt and retiring tax-free. And that will be step one for you in being able to lay the foundation that you need to be able to manage your credit and to get out of collections. Or if you're in business, to know how to make those collections. And then once you get that money, to know what to do with it. And we want to see you ultimately successful. And so we thank you so much for sharing this time with us, for being here. It's such a privilege and an honor to be able to share this information with you. And I look forward to having you here with me next week on Monday evening at 6 p.m. I will see you for another Mindful Money Moment. Thank you so much and have a great night. Everyone take care.